airport expansion.
My Lords, Heathrow Airport Limited is a 100% privately owned company, subject to a form of economic regulation with which many noble lords will be familiar from the water sector. In that light, can I ask the noble Lord the Minister if he will confirm that the long-standing cross-party policy that any project for a third runway should be paid for wholly by the private sector and not the taxpayer is going to continue, and in particular that any proposal as part of that project to relocate, tunnel or bridge over the M25 is also part of the cost that is to be paid for by the private sector and not by the taxpayer.
The noble Lord Moylan is completely correct about the ownership of Heathrow Airport Limited, which of course, who of course are likely to be a promoter, but possibly not the only promoter of a third runway at Heathrow Airport. It certainly is government policy that a third runway should be paid for by a third party, but the detail of what it is, what other work is necessary to allow it to happen is not clear, because the government has invited proposals to be brought forward by the summer, and promoters will hopefully make them, at which point it will become clear what those proposals entail, how much other work is needed, and how much they're proposing to pay for.
The U-turn announced by the Chancellor in support of airport expansion across the South East is astonishing. Could the noble Lord the Minister explain how a third runway at Heathrow will meet Labour's 4 tests on growth across our regions, on climate, on air pollution and on noise pollution? And does the Minister agree with me that a far more investment in regional transport infrastructure would be a better, sustainable way to secure economic growth across the country?
I can assure the noble Baroness that the criteria that she has set out for airport expansion proposals are indeed the ones that the government would use in order to look at any application for a development control order, but we don't have that application yet, because this is in the early stages. But I can also say that actually the proposition that connectivity drives growth, jobs and housing in line with the government's missions and the plan for change, it's no different in respect of air connectivity, which also drives economic growth.
My Lords, in responding to my honourable friend Sian Berry in the other place on the question of how this could possibly fit within the government's legal climate commitments, the government suggested the answer was sustainable aviation fuel. That currently consists of less than 0.1% of aviation fuel, and it would take an awful lot of fried fish and chips if we were going to rely on used cooking oil. Does the noble Lord the Minister stand by the claim that somehow we're going to see a massive explosion in so-called sustainable aviation fuel?
I'd say to the noble Baroness that the expression "a massive explosion in sustainable aviation fuel" is probably literally not what she meant. But her serious point is, and the answer to that is yes, because actually this country can be a leader in sustainable aviation fuel. It can support thousands of jobs, and the plan is for it to be a much larger proportion of total aviation fuel. The government is committed to its legal obligations to reach net zero in 2050 as set out in the Climate Change Act, and the analysis that my department have done suggests that a third runway is compatible with net zero, because actually sustainable aviation fuel will make a difference, and the government is proceeding with it, and there's a lot of investment in advanced fuels in order to get technology to move forward.
My Lord. Does my noble friend the Minister agree that that airport growth can be a great stimulus to the local economy, especially in places like Doncaster, Sheffield? The airport closed under the previous government, but I was pleased to see that it was mentioned by the Chancellor in her speech. Can he assure me that his department will be doing all it can to support the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport?
I thank my noble friend for that question, and this department will do all it can to facilitate the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport.
I was the Secretary of State who took this proposal through the Commons 7 years ago, and I declare an interest as an advisor to Atkins Realis. Can I ask the Minister, the Chancellor suggested that work on the runway could begin before the end of this Parliament, which is only 4 years' time now. In order for that to happen, it would be necessary for the process to start partway through. Does the department believe they have to go back to square one and start from the beginning with a national policy statement and then a DCO again? Or do they believe that that process can be short-circuited, they could start somewhere further down the track?
The noble lord is very familiar with the processes that have been gone through so far, and I think the answer to that question is that it really depends on what's submitted by the promoter this summer. We all know that there was a proposal for a third runway in the northeastern quadrant of the airport, and it very largely depends on whether, to start with, that submission is very similar to the one they made previously, or whether in these terms there's something substantially different.
2014, that the cost estimate for the Heathrow third runway just to build it was £18 billion to be paid for in the end by higher fees on the airlines. British Airways was clear it would not pay. In addition, Transport for London costed the upgrade to local transport as between £15 to £20 billion, of which the airport offered to pay £1 billion, the rest falling on London businesses and TfL. This project failed because the business case is completely ludicrous. Will the Minister now update us on the range of costings and, more importantly, who will pay?
The costs of a third runway, of course, depend absolutely on the proposals of the promoter to deliver it. And without that proposition, we can't usefully have a debate about how much it might cost. But my earlier answer to the noble Lord Moylan stands about the cost of the runway itself. The only other thing I'd point out to the noble Baroness is that since 2014, of course, the Elizabeth line has opened and a significant amount of extra railway capacity has already been provided to Heathrow Airport.
My Lords, I wonder if my noble friend the Minister has any comment to make on the fact that there is a good deal of air freight that arrives at Heathrow, and whether it would be possible, in fact, and rather a good idea, to redirect some of that air freight to the currently standing idle Doncaster Sheffield airport, thereby freeing up possible slots for other flights to come into Heathrow, possibly therefore obviating the need for the third runway.
I'm not intimately familiar with the proportion of air freight that arrives in Heathrow on aircraft solely adapted for cargo. My understanding is that much of the air freight that arrives at Heathrow in fact arrives in the holds of passenger aircraft, and therefore redirecting it is far from simple a process. But the earlier point about the success of regional airports stands, which is that this government is very anxious to reopen Doncaster Sheffield, and will do everything it can to achieve that.
The Minister agrees with me that expansion must be affordable, improve operation resilience for passengers and also freight, and be compatible with environmental commitments. And the modernisation of our airspace is a key part of that. And modernising our skies is a crucial project that has been going on for many years. I remember it well from my time as Aviation Minister. Can the noble Lord the Minister update the House on the progress of this important project?
I shall have to write to the noble Baroness, but otherwise I can agree with everything she said.
Minister will remember Boris Johnson's promises of levelling up. This government's recent announcements on support for economic growth, both in transport and in advanced manufacturing, has favoured the South and East very strongly. Will the government please ensure in future planning that it does think about the impact on the rest of the country, and also take into account that the South East is short of water and certainly is short of renewable electricity?
What I'd say to the noble Lord is that an expansion of Heathrow will be of benefit to the entire UK, not just London and the South East. and a recent analysis suggested that over half of the benefits would in fact be into the rest of the UK and not in the southeast of England.
In welcoming the government's announcement of considering a third runway, what will the government's attitude be to airports outside London in wanting to see them expand? And does he think the expansion of Heathrow will at all put at danger the expansion of regional airports?
I'll be interested to discuss with the noble lord what his view of the question that he's asked is, because of course he was a Secretary of State for Transport in his time. But certainly the view here is that actually it won't affect the development of regional airports, and for the development of regional economies, the government is quite clear that the appropriate development of regional airports is the right thing to do.